director? No pressure.
Okay, thank you for coming. Thank you. And I'm done. My name is Kiley Dorton. I'm an interface engineer here at SOLTECH, for anybody that I haven't met yet. And today I'm going to be talking about a suite of tools from Google called Firebase. So if you guys could raise your hand if you've ever used Venmo before. Okay, keep your hands up if you've used NPR1, Shazam, Duolingo, Lyft, Todoist. Okay, you can put your hands down. So nearly everybody here has already used a Firebase-powered app. Firebase is used by all those apps and a whole lot more. And by the end of this talk, hopefully you'll understand why those companies are using Firebase and maybe have a few ideas about how we could use it here as well. As soon as I started here, I knew I wanted to do a talk about Firebase. But while I was preparing this talk, I had to ask myself why. What is it about Firebase that I like so much that I wanted to do this talk? And I realized last night that what it boils down to is it's just really fun to use. It's a great developer experience, and everything about it is fast and really easy. It's straightforward enough that anyone who knows JavaScript could quickly pick it up in about one day. And it unlocks the ability for a front-end developer like me to implement authentication, a database, production-grade hosting, all without needing to set up any servers or rely on anybody else. So for me, it kind of feels like I have a superpower. It's like I've got a team of 50 people all handling my backend for me, and it just works, and I don't have to do any of it. So that's why I love Firebase, especially if you're a front-end developer. You would probably love Firebase for the same reasons, because it's basically like you have this giant backend team and you don't have to do anything. But let's get one thing out of the way. Firebase is not a replacement for Amazon Web Services, and it's definitely not a replacement for Microsoft Azure. In fact, it's not really in the same category. Google has a whole suite of powerful cloud offerings that compete with AWS and Azure, and that's called the Google Cloud Platform. There's a ton of really interesting stuff happening in GCP that I think Thomas could tell you a whole lot about, probably. But it's getting more and more competitive with AWS and Azure every single day. We'll save that for another talk, and this talk is about Firebase, and Firebase is a little bit different. So let's take a 5-minute mental walk around the block so that we can all get in the right mindset. Let's start by describing our typical approach to projects here. When we get a big project, we typically think about building a single solution from start to finish. That's the project. We capture what the client wants, and then we build it. The first line of code that we write will hopefully be present in the final deliverable. And we actually build the real final product from day one until the day the project is completed. And that's normal. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But that mindset isn't going to work for us today and for Firebase. Today, we need to walk up the hill and look at things from a different point of view. So, are you up for that? First thing is, for the next hour, let's let go of that idea that we're going to start a project with a very well-defined set of blueprints, and that our only job is to build a thing that exactly matches those blueprints. So poof, that idea is gone. Now, let's replace that idea with a brand new one. We're going to start a project with a client that has a problem that needs solving. They know their world way better than we do, so they've come to the table with a pretty clear idea of what they want. And that's normally what we capture and turn into requirements. But today, we're not going to call those requirements, we're going to call them hypotheses. And buried inside those hypotheses are a small set of foundational assumptions. For example, a client may tell us that their end users need a mobile-first, fully responsive web dashboard with live updating stats. That sounds like a reasonable and pretty normal request from a client. But today, we're not calling that a requirement. It's a hypothesis, and buried within it are at least two assumptions. First, that their end users will want to access their dashboard using a mobile device at all, and two, that their users need the stats to update in real time. Both of those assumptions are going to be really expensive for the client. So it behooves them to want to prove those before we actually start spending a whole lot of money and time building them. So the question is not whether or not our client understands the problem that they need solved. They're bringing that expertise to the table. We're bringing the experience of completing hundreds of software projects and knowing that there's a very real chance that the initial feature set will miss the mark in one way or the other. That it's really expensive to fix those kinds of almost right but not quite right mistakes. And not only were time and money spent building a slightly incorrect feature, but time and money will be spent to correct it. So for today, Let's reframe our first priority to be helping them avoid that expensive mistake by testing the assumptions up front, wasting as little time and money as possible, so that when we do start ramping up to a full-scale build, we know beyond a doubt that what we're building is going to work. So our goal is to put a prototype in our clients' hands so they can sit down with real-world end users and validate their assumptions. We need to find the fastest and least expensive way to build that prototype. And this is where Firebase comes in. Whereas Firebase probably isn't the right tool for building our clients' full-scale applications, it's the perfect tool for conducting rapid, small-scale tests. We could let one front-end developer spend 3 days building a tiny prototype on Firebase that focuses on just one of those foundational assumptions. And we could put that prototype in our clients' hands so that they can test it with a group of their end users. If it ends up not yielding the results we all assumed it would, imagine the amount of time and money we just saved our client. As Eric Ries, who's the author of The Lean Startup, said, we should repeat a build, measure, learn loop until we've proven every hypothesis and validated every assumption. And that's really what Firebase is really good at. So for today, those are our marching orders. And with that in mind, the value proposition for Firebase becomes way more clear for us. I know that was a really long-winded introduction to this talk, but I wanted to ground you in the only mindset in which Firebase really makes any sense for us. It's one in which it's our go-to tool for building rapid prototypes and low-cost proof of concepts. So here we go into Firebase. This is the initial launch video. In September of 2011, two guys, James Tamplin and Andrew Lee, began building Firebase. 7 months later, they launched the initial beta. I remember watching this video in 2012, and my daughter was just 1 year old, and she just started first grade like 2 days ago. So I guess that means Firebase is in kindergarten right now. So that's Tamplin who's talking, and that's Lee sitting over there in the corner. And I wanted to show this because I think it's inspiring and humbling to see how a big, successful company like Firebase can start in a tiny little room with fluorescent lights, you know, like with just their friends sitting around them. It's cool to see a big company just get its start like this. And so basically 1 month after that talk right there, they raised $1.1 million from what at the time they were calling real-time app infrastructure. And they had about 7,000 developers using Firebase. So you can see that this was in 2012. Well, 1 year after that, just fast forward 1 year, they raised another $5.6 million with an expanded goal. Now they wanted to enable developers to create web and mobile apps, quote, really fast without worrying about servers or writing server code. So that leads us to basically right where that little inflection point is. If you've heard about Firebase around that time, you might have heard it described as a fun toy to play with. It was a fast, real-time database, which essentially was just a big NoSQL store in the cloud. It was a great way to power like a chat application that needed to keep thousands of concurrent clients in sync in real time. And that's about all Firebase was back then. But about 3 years ago, things changed for Firebase in a really big way. In October of 2014, Tamplin and Lee had grown the community of developers to, using Firebase from 7,000 to about 110,000 developers. That growth and the building excitement about Firebase was enough to convince Google to acquire the company for an undisclosed amount of money. After that acquisition, Firebase spent the next 18 months quietly integrating with the Google Cloud platform and steadily growing its community of developers. So when they got acquired, it was 110,000, and at the end of 18 months, it was 450,000 developers using Firebase. So it's no small tool, and it's definitely no longer a toy. In May of last year, they announced a really huge expansion. It's the now branded Google Firebase, and it was expanding dramatically. At the time, Firebase consisted of just a real-time database, user authentication, and hosting. But with the launch of the unified app platform, there came several new features, including analytics, cloud messaging, storage, remote config, a test lab, notifications, integrations with Google AdWords and Google AdMob, and brand new web console, new documentation, new SDK. It was basically a whole new thing. And that's a lot. So that's why I'm giving this talk today, because if you met Firebase a few years ago, you might not even recognize it today. And it doesn't stop there. Just a couple months ago at Google I/O 2017, the Firebase team announced even more new features, including cloud functions with dynamic hosting, the ability to authenticate using just a phone number. If you've ever gotten a text message that allows you to enter 6 digits and then be authenticated, they acquired the company that did that really well, so now you can authenticate with a phone number, app performance monitoring, and enhanced app analytics. So it's clear that Firebase is growing fast and that Google is investing heavily in it. We'll talk about what it can do and can't do as of today, but I would urge you to keep an eye on Firebase over the next few years. If the past years are any indication, it's only going to grow more and more feature-rich and competitive. So over the next half hour or less, I'm going to introduce you to the core features of Firebase. So that's a Google data center in Iowa, and basically that's where Firebase lives, along with a lot of other data centers. So what is Firebase? In short, the marketing page will tell you that Firebase helps you build apps fast without managing infrastructure. It's backed by Google and is built on Google's infrastructure, and it's used by some of the top apps like we heard at the top of this talk. You can let Firebase handle the details of your backend infrastructure, all your user engagement and monetization, so that you can spend the time building the app itself. Now there are 2 main categories. You can see those. There are 2 main categories of services within Firebase. There's the tools that help you develop and test your app. They're on the left. And there's the tools that help you grow and engage your audience. And unfortunately, we don't really have time to cover all of them today. It's just too much. But here's what I think of as the core features of Firebase. And we'll talk about the items that are outlined in red over there today in depth. And the items outlined in green, we're not going to talk about at all, but I do consider them core features and some really cool aspects to those. So maybe there'll be a part 2 of this talk where we could look into the green features. But today we're going to be talking about all the red features, starting with Firebase Authentication. Firebase Authentication is almost a requirement, or authentication in general is a requirement for almost all of our apps. To implement a robust authentication system would typically take us, anywhere from a few days to a week or even a month, especially if you consider not just the signing in and the actual authentication, but showing the list of users, giving them permissions. All of that stuff could take us lots and lots of time to implement. Of course, this is already built into Firebase. So if we're trying to test an assumption about end users wanting to see stats on their phone, we aren't interested in whether or not we can build a robust authentication system. We know we can do that. So what we want to test is, does the user want to see stats on their phone? So we can use the built-in Firebase Auth system for this prototype instead, and basically skip 3 weeks of development. Firebase Authentication provides backend services, SDKs, UI libraries to authenticate users. It supports authentication using passwords, phone numbers, federated identity providers like Google, Facebook, and Twitter, and more. And as of May, like I said, you can authenticate using SMS messages. So I put this slide first because this feature set alone could save us a ton of time if we're going to do these rapid prototypes. We could essentially get a secure authentication system up and running within minutes or maybe a couple hours tops. And also, as a front-end developer, not having to worry about implementing my own auth system or finding somebody who can do it with me is just a breath of fresh air. It's like heaven. You just do a few lines of code, you can see this is actually almost all you need to implement the full auth system. And if we have time, I'm going to do this live for you at the end of the talk. Next, let's talk about what started it all, the star of the show, the Firebase real-time database. This product started it all. It's probably the one you've heard of if you've ever heard of or used Firebase. And at its core, the real-time database is just a cloud-hosted NoSQL database. It's just a big giant JSON object in the cloud. Instead of typical HTTP requests, the real-time database uses data synchronization. Every time data changes, any connected device receives that update within milliseconds, and it is fast. It feels like magic. It's almost instantaneous. Firebase apps remain responsive even when the client is offline, like even if you lose service on your phone, because the SDK automatically persists that data to your phone's to disk, whatever the client may be, your laptop or phone. So even when you're offline, the apps can still work. And the cool thing is, the way that they add things to the Firebase database, when the phone regains connection, it will automatically synchronize and things will be in the right order. So if you have created a chat application, and let's say you're driving through a tunnel and there's 55 messages that come in all at different times while you're in the tunnel, and when you come out of the tunnel, even if you sent a message in the middle of all that, everything will be synchronized when your phone regains the connection, and everything will be in the right order. And that's some serious magic. And something that's really cool and really hard to implement on our own. So they've already done all that hard work for us. If you use the real-time database, you get that for free. It can be accessed directly from a mobile device or web browser, so this essentially removes the need for an application server entirely for this particular thing if you need to store this type of data. And you can write security and data validation rules that are executed when data is read or written. So if we needed to test whether or not the clients really need that real-time stats update, does it really need to be real-time? We could use this to build a prototype without spending the time to build our own WebSocket solution. And I know on a project I was working on recently, we spent a whole lot of time working with WebSockets. And we had never really proven that assumption beforehand. So all that time we could have used this maybe to test out that with a very small prototype and prove that really it is worthwhile to spend all that time on WebSockets. Okay, next, let's talk about cloud storage. This is relatively new for Firebase. Not everything fits nicely into a giant JSON object in the sky. Sometimes you need to store photos or videos or PDFs or Excel files, and that's where cloud storage comes in. This was actually one of the huge complaints about Firebase in the early days is people were like, well, not everything is text. I can't store this or that or this in Firebase. And finally, they added the ability to store these types of files, blobs. So the cloud storage is built for exabyte scale. It can handle nearly anything we would ever throw at it. It's actually built on the same infrastructure that powers Spotify and Google Photos. So I have a feeling that anything we threw at it wouldn't even come close to the scale that those two apps are. The SDKs for cloud storage perform uploads and downloads regardless of network quality. So one thing that's really hard to implement, but that they've already done for us, is if you're uploading a huge file, let's say you have like a 12 megabyte photo, you're uploading that photo and you're halfway through, you drive through that same tunnel. First of all, you should probably find a new way to work because going through that tunnel is going to be annoying every single day, losing connection. But this SDK automatically pauses that download and restarts it when you regain connectivity without you having to do anything. So giant file uploads and downloads, that happens automatically, even if the connection is intermittent. So we'll talk about pricing entirely in a minute, but just to call it out here, for the free tier, you get 5 gigabytes of storage, cloud storage, with a 1 gigabyte per day download limit, and that's for free. So that's more than enough for any of our prototyping needs for sure, but it might even be enough for most of our production app needs as well. 5 gigabytes is quite a lot depending on what you're trying to store. It does get pricey. If you need to store really, really big files and lots of them, this is probably not the way to go, and so that goes back to this isn't our solution for everything. But for prototyping, it's basically free and unlimited, and it's already implemented. So you basically just have to do this, and suddenly you've got storage in the cloud. Now this is really new for Firebase, just as of March. Cloud functions. We've heard about cloud functions from AWS earlier this year. We heard about cloud functions from Azure. This is the exact same thing, and it's from Google. Google Cloud Platform has this thing called Cloud Functions, and they basically just built that right into Firebase. So what we're talking about here is the integration of the Google Cloud Platform Cloud Functions and all of the Firebase features. And some really cool things happen when you have those things shaking hands. Basically, it lets you automatically run backend code in response to events that are triggered by Firebase features and HTTPS requests. So your code is stored, your code for these functions is stored in Google's cloud and runs in a managed environment, Node.js. There's no need to manage and scale your own servers. And these functions, they can respond to triggers like the real-time database. So if a user, let's say a user added a new tweet, you could respond, you could use a function here to say, okay, every time this user adds a tweet, make sure you notify all of the people who follow this user. That's something that would be really difficult to do, almost impossible to do in Firebase without Cloud Functions. Now whenever the user adds a tweet, we can use this function to say, okay, go find all this user's followers and send them a push notification on their phone. That's what you'd use Cloud Functions for. You can also do it for authentication. So let's say a user signs in for the first time after a 3-month hiatus with your app. You could note that, and in the function, you could send them a little email that says, hey, glad to see you came back. Here's a free $5 credit. We hope that you come back every day now, something like that. So you can see how these functions can respond to these types of events and triggers. The cool thing about these is you deploy them with a single command from the command line. So you write your function, and you can deploy it, and boom, it's already up in the cloud. You don't have to worry about credentials. You don't have to worry about server configuration or saying, I want Cloud Functions or I don't want Cloud Functions or anything like that. it's already set up for you with your Firebase account. So you just write the cloud function, one command line, and you're done. In many cases, our clients might prefer to control application logic on the server to avoid tampering or to keep that code from being reverse engineered if we have like a very secretive client, and that is fully understandable. So cloud functions allow us to fully insulate from the client, so you can be sure that all of their client logic stays private. All right, let's switch over to talk about my favorite feature. I saved the best for last. Undoubtedly, my favorite feature. Firebase hosting provides production-grade web content hosting. It allows you to quickly and easily deploy web apps and static content to a global content delivery network, or CDN, with a single command. There's zero configuration, and SSL is built in so that Firebase hosting content is always served securely. And it's a pain to set up SSL. So I know this would be really nice for some of us to have if you've ever tried to set up SSL by yourself. You get it for free. So you get that nice little green lock in the top of the browser address bar automatically. Every file you upload to Firebase hosting is cached on SSDs at the CDN edges all around the world. Now there aren't as many edges as you'd find in Azure or in AWS, and they're certainly not broken out into government versions and public versions or anything like that. You're not going to get any of those features with this. But what you are going to get is ease of use. You can see here you say Firebase deploy, and your code instantly goes up and is propagated out to each of these CDN edges all around the world. You don't have to do anything. It's amazing, and your app loads blazingly fast. So if you're ever building static applications or web apps, this is your best friend.
Like Angular 2 or something like that?
Yeah, any Angular apps, any React apps. If you have just a statically generated app like Jekyll or something like that, this is an amazing way to do that. It's served really, really fast. All right, so imagine how many days we typically spend configuring our production grade hosting at the very beginning of a project, really before our first commit. We need to have all of this stuff set up in the cloud. We wouldn't have to worry about that here. So for this prototype, that's what I mean. In the very first few minutes, we've skipped all of that setup, and now we're already writing the logic for this prototype. We're designing the UI for the prototype. We're not worrying about infrastructure. So let's talk, that's enough for all of the core features of Firebase. Let's talk a little bit about pricing. Probably the best part about Firebase is almost everything that you need to use for this prototyping is free until you reach a serious level of usage. For what we're talking about today, rapid prototypes, small scale tests, we would never need to pay a penny. Which, think about our business here, that means we'd never have to bother our clients with requests or questions about infrastructure costs during the early phases of the project. We could just leave that all off and just say, hey, yeah, we built this, here it is, we didn't have to pay a penny for it, neither did you, let's go ahead and test it. You can see the pattern here. Let me also show you. So all of those products over there are free, and I didn't cover all of them because we didn't have time. But authentication is free. Cloud messaging, which is what lets you send push notifications to devices, that's free. And you can see the real-time database is free for up to 100 simultaneous connections. Firebase can support 100,000 simultaneous connections out the box. So like I said, it's not a toy anymore. If you ever have to build an app that needs tens of thousands of people to all see an update in real time, I mean, imagine how much building that would cost if we tried to roll our own. Firebase already has support for up to 100,000 simultaneous clients, all connected, getting updated in real time. For free, you get 100, and if you start paying 25 bucks a month, you get that 100,000. You can go more than 100,000, you just have to break your Firebase into multiple instances. Then next, these are the other two things that we covered today. Storage, you can see on the free plan, you get 5 gigs and a gig a day download. And for cloud functions, I can't imagine that any of our prototypes would ever reach that volume, but you get 125,000 locations per month. Okay, so that's the pricing. Now, let's talk about what Firebase is not. All this is great, but Firebase is not perfect. I carefully presented it as a great way to build rapid prototypes, and for that it fares extremely well. But if you look at it from the perspective of a long-term backend-as-a-service for a product in production, it begins to look a whole lot less appealing. First, the real-time database is fast precisely because it was built without features that would slow it down. That means you'll be stuck without the ability to query data in any powerful way, and very important to note here, you're stuck without the ability to create relationships between your data, which is kind of important. You find yourself duplicating data in lots of places in order to simplify calls that you have to make for this view or for that view. And it's a whole different way of thinking about structuring your data. Typically, we try not to duplicate data. In Firebase, that structure is encouraged. It's very, very hard to grapple with that when you start using the Firebase database. Now, it's insanely fast, and it can keep 100,000 client devices in sync in real time, but that speed comes at the cost of hampered functionality that could really cause you a headache in full-scale production environment. Next, one of the other problems is that you'll be dangerously tied to Firebase. A few years ago, you may remember Facebook acquired a company called Parse that had a similar offering to Firebase. Had anybody ever heard of Parse before?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you if that's what it is.
Yeah, Facebook acquired Parse. Everybody, the developers, were really excited because they thought that it meant Parse was going to grow and be supported for a long time, but they were sorely mistaken because despite the fact that thousands of apps were using it in production, Facebook decided to shut Parse down. And all those developers had to migrate their apps elsewhere. Many of them went to Firebase. It was not a pretty sight. So though Google is clearly investing heavily in Firebase and shows no sign of slowing, there's always the chance that they could decide to shut it down and focus their resources elsewhere. And if that were to happen, you'd basically be looking at a complete rewrite of your entire data layer. Something to be aware of. And finally, the very abstraction that gives you the freedom to rapidly develop these prototypes in the early stages could tie your hands behind your back down the road. Without the ability to fine-tune all the cloud infrastructure, you're at the mercy of the Google auto-scaling robots. Handing over control is nice at first, but if you ever run into a situation where you need to take the wheel, you won't be able to. And in Greg's talk about Azure, I remember him mentioning that with these cloud functions, they auto-scale up and down as user demand goes up and down, which is great. But he mentioned this use case in which you're going to have a big spike tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. You're launching sub-big launch, and you know it's going to happen, and you really like to have all of your cloud functions already scaled up. Firebase, there's no way to do that. So that's a very good example of how you basically give away all that control in order to have the freedom to write one command, Firebase deploy, and it's all up in the cloud. So it comes at a cost. Now, that's it for the structured presentation of the talk, and we're about to move into some live coding. But I figured we could use this latter half to write a little bit of code, see Firebase in action, maybe answer some questions. And I've come up with 3 separate challenges for us to do live in code so we can see Firebase in action. Before I jump into these and go into the code, does anybody have any just general questions about Firebase you want to talk about? Yeah.
So how does it, I don't know if you know this, but how does it integrate with Cloud SQL? Can you actually set it up so that it will write and do its own service to a relational database easily?
I think that the question is like, how does it relate, or how does it work alongside some of the other features like Cloud SQL, Google Cloud Platform SQL? I believe you use Cloud Functions for that, and I don't think it's really a nice integration. But see, that's what I kind of meant when I was saying keep an eye on Firebase, because the big gripe of Firebase for a long time was no cloud storage, no cloud storage. I can't store photos and videos. Well, they added cloud storage. Now the big gripe is no relations. Our data, not every kind of data works in NoSQL, and you hear that again and again and again. I can bet that next year at Google I/O, I'd be willing to put money on this. We'll see some kind of solution for that come into Firebase. So keep an eye on it. But right now, I don't think there's an easy way to work with SQL. Yes?
So for host state, can you come up with DNS reroutes? So can you actually set up a custom domain, or do you have to do the Firebase, whatever the nasty?
You can totally do a custom domain. Yes, you're not stuck with the firebaseapp.com, or there's another one like firebase.io or something. But you're not stuck with that. You get that for free with SSL and everything. But you can absolutely do a custom domain. They automatically provision the SSL certificate for you. It's really easy, and they keep it up to date, and that's free. So that's another good reason to use Firebase hosting. Okay, let's dive into some live code. Sound good? All right. So I was going to do this in Vue.js, but I just started a new project here that's on React, and I felt like I should get a little practice with React, so we're going to do all of this live coding in React instead. And I'd really love to do a Vue.js talk maybe one day. Okay, so first things first. We're going to do I didn't want you to think that there's any magic happening here. So we're going to start from a very brand new Create React App project. So the first thing you need to know is you need to use Firebase, you need to npm install Firebase tools, like that. And then the Firebase tools are going to allow you to do things like Firebase deploy. They're going to allow you to run Firebase init, which is going to set up your project. So Firebase tools. You have to have Create React App, which I already have. So I'm not going to do either of those things. But you need to install both of those. So what we're going to do is we're going to do Create React App, and we're going to call this Tappy Johns. This is going to create a new React app for us. I have built a full clicker game that allows you to make sandwiches and then sell those sandwiches. And I was very ambitious and thought we might build it here today. But last night I proved that I cannot do that. It would take forever and I made way too many mistakes. So instead what we're going to do is the very simple version, which is called Tappy Johns. And it lets you sign in and it lets you sign out. So that's great. That's what we're going to build right now. Okay, so let's go into Tappy Johns.
Cue the baby steps.
What?
Cue the baby steps.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to take baby steps here. Okay, so here we are. This is a brand new project. No magic is happening. If I go into source and app.js, and I go ahead and say npm start, oops, npm start. Let's take a look at what this app looks like. Welcome to React, yay. Okay, so to use Firebase, I've been talking about how easy it is, Let's prove that. I'm going to go ahead, don't worry, I'm not going to type all this out in front of you. I've already got a lot of it done, so you don't have to see it. All right, so we just did all this Create React app. First things first, we need to add a Firebase configuration file to our project. So what I usually do is create this little file called firebase.js, paste this in. So you can see what we're doing here. We're importing Firebase. So first, we're going to have to npm install save Firebase. So now we've got Firebase in our project here. So you can see we're going to import Firebase. We're going to have to fill out this config block here, and we're going to get that from Firebase itself. Then we initialize Firebase, which makes the Firebase all the methods available to us in this app. We're going to export it so we can use it all over the app, and we're also going to export these things, the database, authentication, and Google, because we're going to be signing in with Google. And this is it. This is the whole Firebase, basically the configuration you have to do to get up and running. So, well, we did it, and that was like just a minute. So you can see we need to fill this stuff out right here, right? So I'm going to go ahead and sign into Firebase over here, this window. So I'm already signed in. They have this thing called the console. Remember I told you they just relaunched this. This is like the brand new look and feel for the console. And you can see I've been doing some testing. These are all my Firebase projects here. If you click Add Project, let's call this thing Tappy Johns. You click Create Project. This is going to create a brand new Firebase project. It's going to set up hosting, authentication, cloud functions. Everything's going to be ready. Ooh, it's so fast. Ooh, it's amazing. Okay, so you click this Add Firebase to your web app. And what we're going to be doing here is just getting these keys. So you may be wondering, like, oh, shouldn't we like not show those keys to everybody? Aren't they like app secrets that people can now hack our app? Yes and no. It doesn't matter if you show these keys to anybody because the reads and writes to your database are protected by authentication rules. And it's like a declarative way of writing rules. So even if somebody has all this stuff and they try to write to your database, if they're not authenticated, nothing's going to happen. Also, if they try to read your database, if they're not authenticated, they won't be getting anything back. So this is essentially useless gobbledygook unless you actually are authenticated and allowed into the application. So you can see this, we've already got all that stuff up and running. So now our little Firebase config is ready. So what do you say, let's add in just a little bit of styles. I don't know if anybody has ever used tachyons before, but it's a nice little CSS framework, I guess you could say, that makes things look nice.
What's it called?
It's called tachyons. Tachyons. I don't know exactly how to say that. I believe it's like the science term, I guess. Okay, so now we have some nice styles. Let's go back and look at our app really quick. Should still be up and running. Okay, now let's add just a couple classes to our body tag here. I'm not going to follow all the best practices because I want this to work fast for us. All right, so I'm just going to remove everything that's in our app.js file, all of this stuff. I'm going to remove all that and replace it with this really simple stuff that I wrote for us to see authentication working. Okay, so here's what I replaced it with. You can see Tappy John's, it says hi, and there's that. That's, and I hate that centering that comes with React. Okay, there we go. So now, there we go, that's what we wanted. Okay, so let's go ahead and work with Firebase hosting. I want to show you guys how easy it is to deploy to Firebase. Okay, so let's go back to our command line. I can't let you guys miss this amazing emoji art here. So I'm going to stop the server. I'm going to say Firebase init. Look at that. Firebase. That's my favorite part of working with Firebase, is that moment right there. So this is Firebase init. It's their little CLI that's going to let us do the database and hosting and everything really easily. So you select which ones of these you want. So I want database and I want hosting. Press enter. And it's like, cool, which of your Firebase projects do you want to connect this to? You can see all my Firebase projects. And we just set up Tappy John's, right? That's the one we just made. So I'm going to hit enter. It's going to let me say my database rules file. It's going to ask me which public directory I want to serve all my files from. And React, by default, creates a build folder. So I'm going to call this build instead of public. It automatically configures the server to handle single-page applications. So like Taylor asked, if you're building a React or an Angular app or a Vue.js app, if you have a single-page application, this is automatically going to configure it so that everything, no matter what the user puts in, gets redirected to the index file. So I'm going to say yes. All right, boom. Firebase init is complete. And now we can actually start hosting this thing. So let's go ahead and say, let's say npm run build to build our React app for production. And then we're going to do Firebase deploy, and it's going to go out to all of the different edges all around the world. Okay, so let's do Firebase deploy. This is how you use Firebase hosting. Uploading. It's going to put our build directory out there. And in just a second, if you guys have your phones, hopefully we can load this up on your phones as well.
Does Firebase give you a website, a URL?
Yeah, it'll give you a URL right there. You can see it actually, tappy-johns at firebaseapp.com.
Can you customize that so it doesn't say Firebase app if you want?
Yeah, you can get a custom domain for sure. So let's go ahead and go to that URL.
tappy-johns.firebase.com?
Yeah, or .firebaseapp.com. tappy-johns.firebaseapp.com. It should load super fast. You should notice on your phone that it's like boom.
Eee.
Yeah, and you shouldn't see any loading or anything like that. It's freaky fast.
Pretty fast.
So that's Firebase.
Jimmy Jones.
Yeah. So that's Firebase hosting. We just did it. That's all you have to do. And now every time you make a change to your app and you want to deploy it, you just do Firebase deploy. And it's instantly going out to a CDN all over the world. And let me show you something else. If I go look at this, here's our Firebase app, Tappy John's. If I go to hosting, see this deployment history right here? That's the deploy we just did. Now this will start to grow, and you'll see all of your historical deployments. And if at any time you run into a bug, you click one button, you can revert back to that old deployment. You just right-click it and say revert back instantly. And so if you run into something where you accidentally ship some code you shouldn't have shipped, you can roll back, and this is something that's just built in for free. And that's something you get with all the other big providers, but it's something you get for free alongside all the other easy stuff to use with Firebase. I feel like that's pretty cool. Okay, so we just did the first challenge. Now let's move on to the second challenge, which is to add authentication. Let's add Google Authentication to this app. So in order to do that, we're going to need to import, remember we exported auth from that Firebase file. We're going to need to import auth to the top of our app.js. Okay, so we've just imported auth, so now we have access to auth.all the methods. We're going to need to add a constructor. Oops. Oh man, did I just delete it all?
Lindsay,
I have it though.
Yeah, try to undo.
just undo it.
Yeah, I was trying to undo it. Wasn't
Oh, it wouldn't do it.
Weird. Yeah, just deleted it all. Anyway, I have it right here. Okay, so let's go grab our constructor here real quick. Add that right here. Okay, so now we have a little bit of state. We just have user on state for this React app. Okay, and then in component will mount, we just need to add a listener basically that's going to say anytime the auth state changes, you can see any auth state change right there. Anytime that changes, that's a Firebase method. And it's going to pass in the results of that as user. And basically we can set our state with the user. And it's going to say in the console either the user is signed in or the user is not signed in. Okay, so in the actual UI, we just need to add in that state so we can display it. So we're going to add a user. We're going to replace that little hi up in the top right corner. It's not there anymore, but we're going to replace that. This right here. Okay, now user actions. So you can see we need to add these two components really quick. We've already got them done. So we're going to add a sign-in component. That's going to show the sign-in button. And we're going to add a user actions component that's going to show your name and picture when you get signed in. So let's add user actions. Okay, so let's just import both of these at the top. All right, let's spin this app up so we can see it. All right, let's see. User actions. Imported as user actions.
You can
no.
set it as default, so you need to structure it.
Oh, I gotta do that sign in too. Thank you. Okay, cool. We have our little sign in button, right? Let's try it. So as soon as I click sign in, it opens up a new window you just saw really fast, and it says operation not allowed. So that's kind of what I was saying. We have to allow people to authenticate into our application. So we need to go back over into Firebase. We need to click on authentication, sign in method, and we just said we wanted to use Google authentication. So click on Google, click enable, and save. And now instantly we just implemented OAuth Google. So let's go back to our app here. Refresh the page, have a nice clean console. Let's click sign in. Come back. See, this is the actual Google Auth workflow or user flow. So if I click my name here, I'm signing in with my Google account, and you can see I'm signed in as Kiley Dorton here in the app.
Nice.
So let's go ahead and deploy this really quick, and then you guys can sign in too. So we build, and then we run Firebase deploy, and then you'll instantly be able to sign in on your phones.
Does it let you integrate with like Facebook, Twitter,
Yes,
Instagram?
you can just as easily as I just did with Google, you can also do with Facebook. Twitter, GitHub, SMS with phones, email and password, and this is a cool one, anonymous. So basically they'll let you sign in anonymously for a little while, use the app. They'll still save all your data as if you were a user, and if you eventually upgrade to signing up, all of your data will still be moved over to that user account, which is pretty cool. Firebase deploy. So now you guys should be able to, as soon as this deployment finishes, you guys should be able to sign in on your phone. And we just implemented CDN hosting, OAuth with Google in 15 minutes. Let's test it though. There's a lot of words, you gotta prove it.
Yeah, it was fast.
Did you
Yeah,
did it update?
it
Did you
just-
sign
yeah.
in? Okay.
Kylie now has all of your personal information.
Yes.
What am I signing up for?
Yeah.
Just check the
I like your passwords.
There-
Kylie's awesome. Here's your password. So did anybody have any problems signing in just then? Like, did it work for everybody who signed in? It did work for
I
you?
refreshed it, I didn't get to sign up.
Yeah.
I did, but then when I signed in, I get a blank screen.
It's working for me.
Oh, it worked for him? Okay.
Mine works good.
Good, good. Well, half and half ain't bad. Okay,
50%.
since I have just a few more minutes, I've pre-prepared something so that we can all play a little bit of a game. Remember I told you I built that clicker game? Well, I wasn't lying. So you just have to go to, I'm going to show you guys the database updating in real time. So I need you guys to go on your phones to Tappy John's. Yeah, go to Tappy John's Test 01, tappy-johns-test01.firebaseapp.com. Sign in there and you should be able to start playing this game that I built. So it's tappy-johns-test01.firebaseapp.com. And we should start seeing you guys being able to make sandwiches and deliver those sandwiches and earn money. Yeah, tappy-johns-test01.
Shorter names.
Yeah, my bad.
I made a sandwich.
You made a sandwich? Okay, as soon as people start making sandwiches, you guys are going to see here, you're going to see this real-time database update. So this is going to happen in real time. So we got 2 people making sandwiches. And delivering sandwiches. Oh, see all these people signing in? So each one of these, now this gives me a chance to explain how you structure data in Firebase. It's very different than how you structure data in any other database. Well, it's NoSQL, it's kind of normal for that. But basically you can see I've got users here, and each one of those keys right there is a unique, it's a UID, a unique user identifier. That's all of you people. Over here, I've given each one of you a store, like a sandwich store, that you each get to run. Each one of those stores gets its own little unique key. And you can see if I open one of these stores, you can see that I've got a manager user ID. So this right here is one of you guys. I don't know who it is, but it's one of you. So one of you guys already has 1 sandwich and 40 bucks. Let's see who has the most money. Somebody has 70 bucks,
What in the world?
24 bucks, 60.
I only have $12.
Oh, somebody has $267, and I.
That's aggressive.
So you can see this data updating live in real time. Now remember that at the very beginning when I said we want to test the assumption of the stats updating in real time for a dashboard? Imagine how easy it would be now for me to implement a dashboard showing this data live. We all saw how it could happen. It's really fast. We could do it in 30 minutes. So I think that's enough. That's Firebase. I hope you guys enjoyed the talk.
Good job, Carl.
Thank you.